Your attempts at doing too much are getting in the way of your success. What if the answer actually was reducing? Today, I'm going to go deep into a couple of different what if questions to help us envision a future that is greater than our current present. And the first one I'm going to talk about is, what if you could only have one meeting with your internal team per month? What would happen if you could only have one meeting with your internal team per month? And for those of you who have multiple meetings with your internal teams throughout the course of a week, maybe it's one per week. What would happen if you reduced it down to one? What would be the job to be done of that specific meeting? What would you need to accomplish? What would you need to achieve? What would you need to identify? What if you reduce things down to one? This is internal team meetings. Now, let's think about it in the context of customers. Now, I get it. You have to have meetings with customers. You can have internal customers that work across other functional areas, and you can have external customers, the people that you work with externally. But what if you just reduced your internal meetings to one? What if we only focused on one? What more could you accomplish? What would you have to do in that meeting? What would be your call plan? So who would be in the room? What would be their objectives? What are your objectives? And what are our desired next steps for that one meeting? What's the purpose of that meeting? How would you build out a call plan to make sure that you achieve it if you could only do one? Now, that's on the meeting side. Imagine if you could eliminate all of the unnecessary meetings inside your organization by taking this approach. What more could you actually accomplish? If you look at it and ask yourself this question, does real work happen in meetings? Or do you, this is what I try to do with meetings, do you figure out what's working, what's not working, and where are you stuck? For my first what if you could only have one meeting with your internal team per month or per week, depending on what your current frequency is? Let's take that same what if question. And let's actually apply it to another thing where I think we go a little bit too deep on, especially with the amount of data and the amount of information that's available to us today. What if we actually said there's only one KPI that we're focused on as a team? One number to rule them all. One area of focus. What would that one number be to indicate that you're either successful in what you're attempting to accomplish or you're failing? That the work that you're doing is actually working or is not working. Now, this is not checklists. This is not performance against checklists. This is about that specific key performance indicator, that specific KPI that indicates that things are actually working or not working. Now, as a sales leader, one of the most important numbers is the amount of money that you're bringing in. So what are you actually selling? I like to look at this as pipeline develop, because as things develop, they get to a point where they're either sold, closed won, or closed lost. What are you actually generating for the business? Sales ends up being a leading indicator for revenue. Your number might be sales, your number might be revenue, it might be something else in that area. But what if there was only one number? Now, for me, I actually use two numbers here, and every once in a while I'll add a third. My two are pipeline created. Pipeline created, what are we putting in at the top? So we think about this as the funnel. What are we putting in at the top? And then pipeline developed, how is that stuff moving forward? How does that move forward inside those stages of the sales cycle? Remember, those stages start to look like chutes and ladders. But if I know what our numbers are from a pipeline created perspective, and I know what our numbers are from a pipeline developed perspective, that gives me an indicator of what's going to happen on this side. So what if we actually could only have one KPI? And I'm going to add another what if there. What if you could have no more than three? So what if we had between 1 and 3 KPIs? Not these giant dashboards that just get ourselves so caught up in all of these crazy things that are happening across the organization. Now, I understand it. If I'm in your shoes and I'm watching this and thinking, Simmons is crazy. How could you only have one meeting? How could you only have one KPI? as a leader who is responsible for multiple teams, each of those teams is going to have their own specific KPI or their own specific meeting. And when those teams cross functions or come together in an environment where they're working together, they're going to need to have some way to have that communication take place. If it's communication where there's not any feedback, you can put that in an email or you can put it on a video, and you can record something like this and share it with your team. But the thing that I'm asking you to do is just break the way that you think about these things and figure out, is there a way that I can reduce this to the simplest form necessary? Gary Keller talks about this in his book, The One Thing. What's the one thing that makes everything else no meaningless or no longer relevant? It's a focusing question. So how do we create focus in the meetings that we have, the things that we put into this call plan, and how do we create focus in the KPIs that we build, the things that actually help us operate inside the business? It's an important question to ask. And as you take time to reflect on it, look at it and say, what's the job to be done of the KPI? What's the job to be done of the meeting? And if I can't clearly define the job to be done, how has it earned a right to play a role in my business? What's the job to be done of the meeting? What's the job to be done of the KPI? We can apply the Rolfe Reflective Model to this. What's the job to be done? Definition. So what? Why does that actually matter? Why is that important? So what? So what? Why? Now what? What are we doing next? What decisions are we going to make? What's next? What are our actual next steps? If you apply the Rolfe Reflective Model to the way that you look at both meetings from a job to be done perspective and KPIs from a what are we tracking perspective, you will help yourself reflect and say, did this meeting or did this data point actually earn a right to be involved in my business? I would love to hear how you apply something like this inside your organization. And if you want to work on simplifying the approach that you take inside your business, we can do a guided whiteboard session, work together on something like this with you and your team. I do this with teams of up to 10 people for up to 90 minutes, and I guarantee results. We will either solve a problem, design for a solution, or align on strategy and tactics to achieve result. This would fall into the strategy and tactics to achieve a result. Maybe even blur into some of the problem solving piece. But the question I want you to ask today as you go into September, as we start this new month, as we move to the last 4 months of the year, is what if? What if I eliminated so that I created the space for me to accelerate? Eliminate before you accelerate. Simplify. You create complexity by adding more. You simplify by reducing. You can find your catalyst at findmycatalyst.com. You can go deeper onto some of these topics, whether it's leadership, revenue, or execution. Add a little bit of operations in there, or culture into there. Leadership is how we move forward. Culture is how we do what we do. Revenue is how we fund the ability to do what we do. And execution is how we achieve results. This is how we get ourselves into that position where we can execute operationally. Find your catalyst at findmycatalyst.com.